The purpose of this assignment is to practice a kind of argument that you do in your everyday life, as well as in academia and in professional world all the time. A compare and contrast argument is probably something you've done yourself when you were trying to decide what school to attend or what car to buy. You lay out the pros and cons of the choices in front of you, and then, based on that, make your choice. So, practicing that in this assignment for this unit, and the beginning of choosing this for an essay, rather in your life, when you're comparing and contrasting, it just sort of happens naturally. When you're choosing for an essay, you want to get two subjects that are connected in some meaningful way. And the purpose of the argument is not to point out the obvious, but rather to illuminate either subtle differences or unexpected similarities. For example, if you're going to contrast two subjects, you're not going to pick apples and oranges. That difference is obvious, but you might compare two different types of oranges. That comparison contrast may not be as obvious, highlighting a subtle difference between the two. For example, if you were talking about a Red Delicious that is sweet and the Granny Smiths, which are kind of tart and acidic, that contrast is meaningful and it's subtle, drawing attention to distinctions between categories that we usually assume are just the same across the board. Or you could look at unexpected similarities. For example, you might compare how apples and oranges are actually quite similar, even though we assume they're very different. That, again, would be unexpected. It would illuminate something. It would allow you to make an argument rather than just state the obvious. So, what are the steps for this? In week 5, you're going to propose your topic, practice some theses. On week 6 and 7, you're going to have this rough drafting workshop where you're going to be using first the organizer to sort of work out your draft, and then finally produce a rough draft and use our revision form to give comments to 2 of your peers. Then in week 8, you are going to produce your final draft after you have conferences with me. So this is the progress that we're going to be moving for through these next 4 weeks. Criteria is that this is going to be MLA format. That means 12-point font, Times New Roman, double-spaced. It's 750 to 1,000 words, which is going to come out to about 3 or 4 paragraphs, again, double-spaced. It has a thesis that guides the compare-contrast argument, and it makes an argument. It doesn't just make a statement. And these body paragraphs are supporting that argument using evidence to either highlight subtle differences or comparisons that are unexpected. Evidence should come from either your personal experience, should come from both your personal experience and 2 outside sources. You can get these sources from our class, but you can also go out and look for them. We will work through where do you find these, how do you find these, as we are going through the drafting process. And finally, you should be using standard English, grammar, and mechanics. So all of these things are showing up on your rubric here. Here are the documents you can be using. They're also above. And finally, here are the example essays. All of these come from your book. And here, I've annotated one with my notes about what works and what doesn't in this student example. So in this student example from your book, which is a point-to-point argument, it has excellent thesis and strong transition from point to point, moving the argument along. However, it could do a lot better on its evidence. So let's go through it. First of all, this introduction is strong and focused, and the whole introduction makes an argument, but it still has a thesis sentence at the bottom that sums up that argument right away for the reader. But when you compare working at home and working in a public place, the increased organization and focus you need to work in public makes up for the inconvenience of taking your work with you. So here they're setting up 3 points that they're going to look at. 2 of those are our focus and organization. And then the other, the con here, is convenience. So the pros, you're going to be better focused, better organized. Cons, it's inconvenient to go out and study. 2 to 1, 2 wins. And that thesis already sets it up for us. Now, each body paragraph starts to lay that out. Beginning of body paragraph 2, we've got generalizations about what we do when we're in our pajamas and how that makes us feel. That is typically not a good technique. But here, it does work because what it's creating is a mood. And that mood supports the author's point, which is when you're in your pajamas, you're feeling relaxed. However, at the bottom end of the paragraph, the general statements here, which are continued throughout all the body paragraphs, are not as strong. Instead of generally saying things like, if you're at home, you need to get something such as a book or a highlighter. You can always stop what you're doing and get it, no matter what room it's in. But interrupting your workflow to find something that should already be close by is both a waste of time and an easy way to get distracted. It's better to consider exactly what supplies and materials you need to get your work done before you begin and to put everything in one bag to take with you. This is all right, but it would be a lot stronger if instead it had been timed out by the author, that there was some concrete evidence here that this ultimately saves time. So if this writer had said, it takes this much time for me to pack a bag, and it takes this much time for me to get there, but once I get there, finding things only takes me this much time, thus I ultimately save time doing this, that would be effective concrete material. And also timing, how long does it take to get it home? How much time do you waste every single time you get up? Charting this out would make this a much stronger paper. So I've written that out here on the side. If you could say, when I'm at home, it takes me 12 minutes. And I timed myself one day, but when I was at Starbucks, it only took me 3 minutes. And so if I'm interrupting myself every 20 minutes to get something, here's how much time I'm wasting, whereas when I'm out, I'm only losing this many minutes. That sort of concrete evidence from experience would be stronger than these sort of general statements. And that happens throughout the essay, as you can see in my notes that go with this. But let's move on to something that the essay is doing right, and that is transitions. So a point-by-point essay, as we were looking at in your books, needs to transition easily between points, and that happens here. Notice there's no clumsy transition sentences. Instead, the ideas segue easily one to another, and part of that is it's all set up with a very strong thesis that's already sort of mapped out what this argument's going to do. So these are the pros and cons on this essay, things to look for, things to improve upon. I look forward to reading your work and talking with each of you about your papers in the coming weeks. Have a wonderful day. Take care.